One of the best kept secrets of our culture is that many men are deeply spiritual and care deeply about their spiritual lives. It is a secret, however, because it is hidden, sometimes even from the men themselves. In his latest book, The Hidden Spirituality of Men, renowned spiritual educator Matthew Fox gives us, both men and women, 10 metaphors or archetypes, mirrors of the soul, in which we can see clearly in ourselves what was once hidden.
So I'm here to talk about the hidden spirituality of men. Now, why is the spirituality of men hidden? And whom is it hidden from? I think it's often hidden from men themselves. I think men are a lot more spiritual than they give themselves credit for being, or than culture gives them credit for being. And because men have not been rewarded for being introvert, or introspective, or serene. I think we get awarded for accomplishing things. And then also I think there's a certain confusion between spirituality and religion. Some people think they're the same thing. And this makes a lot of men shy of being spiritual because they're not into the religion thing that much. On the one hand, or on the other hand, many men who think they're very religious, I won't mention any presidents by name, are in fact very far from being spiritual. So that's a confusion. Furthermore, part of spirituality is silence. It is mystery. It is the apophatic divinity, as Eckhart talks about, the God without a name who will never be given a name. And so there's a very positive dimension to silence, apophatic divinity, encapsulating what we cherish the deepest. So those are just a few reasons why I think there is such a thing as a hidden spirituality of men. But as the gentleman who began the evening said, you know, we're in very critical times. Just a year and a half ago, I was having a wonderful conversation with a very renowned biologist at Stanford University. I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, you know, we're the first species in 4.5 billion years on this planet that can choose not to go extinct. But of course, he added, we haven't made that choice yet. So this is the price we're paying. These are the times we're living in. These are unbelievably critical times for the survival of our species. And no betting person would bet on our survival in the direction we're now headed. So that's one reason I felt compelled to write a book on the sacred masculine. Because in my lifetime, and many of yours, there's been this tremendous return of the divine feminine. The goddess is back, and she's pissed. But she's back. And women have been bringing her back through many confabs, many circles for 40 years. Women are now in scholarship, from theology to law, and from business to politics, are bringing the goddess back. And of course, this is good for women and it's good for men. But something's missing. If the goddess and the divine feminine are returning, she deserves a partner. She deserves a worthy consort. And you see, the masculine, I believe, has been distorted in our culture. And we've not been cleaning it up profoundly enough. Just this morning I was in a radio program with a radio guy from New York City. And he began, kind of introduced me to his audience, saying he read the book, and these are the words he said. He said, I was involved in the men's movement and all that, but he said, I think it's fizzled out, and then he said, I think Matt's book brings it to a completely new level. Well, those are strong words. I wouldn't say it's fizzled out, but I will say this: the men's movement has not gone broadly enough or deeply enough. And it does need a new direction or a new shot. And I have a lot of respect for Robert Bly. I know him rather well and all that. But I do know him well enough to know that he's a very wounded Lutheran. He's never resolved his issues with Christianity. And one of his sidekicks, Jim Hillman, is a very wounded Jew. And he's never resolved that. Now, I suppose I'm a wounded Catholic, but it's happened so publicly, and every thinking Catholic is a wounded Catholic at this time in history, that I'm still at home with the tradition in the sense that my language, my conceptual framework for 40 years, my study, has been around spirituality. So I'm not ill at ease in that field, either talking about Eastern or Western spirituality. So I do think that I bring some language and dimension perhaps to the subject that the first generation of male liberationists such as Bly and Hillman don't bring. But in any case, let me share with you a small passage from a wonderful book on male spirituality by Joseph Jostrab called, thank you, Sacred Manhood, Sacred Earth, a Vision Quest into the Wilderness of a Man's Heart. This fellow did a lot of vision quests with men, and then he writes about the stories. And it's a very well-written book. Many of us were looking to the Great Mother for salvation, but nobody I knew was seeking right relationship with the Great Father. We all seem to be reacting against the terrible Father, the one who sires reason cut off from love, truth hardened into static form, law void of compassion. But there was no mention of any positive masculine alternatives. So that's what I'm trying to do in this book, is to present 10 archetypes, 10 metaphors that will stir up the healthy masculine and detox. Now, I'm glad to see some women here tonight. Very glad to see so many men. So I do want to kick off from the start and say this is not just a male issue, the return of the sacred masculine, just like the return of the goddess is not just a female issue. Men have profited from that already. Because I believe that women are involved in this topic in at least two ways. First of all, there are a lot of men in your lives. You've got sons, you've got grandsons, you've got fathers, you've got uncles, you've got co-workers, and you've got brothers and lovers and husbands. So you have an investment in this topic from that point of view. But from the other point of view, that the female soul is part masculine, just as a male soul is part feminine. And I believe that if I'm right, that we're walking around, all of us, with a distorted masculinity inside our consciousness, then that includes women too. Women have some detoxing to do. After all, women voted for Dick Cheney too. Wait, I swore I wouldn't mention that name tonight. Anyway, distorted masculine, it always comes out. It's that reptilian brain. The reptilian brain is it needs some taming, and it needs some direction, and it needs to be embraced by the mammal brain, and furthermore, then all of it utilized by our most recent intellectual creative brain. So my methodology in the book is then to present these 10 metaphors or archetypes. Now, Marion Woodman, the Toronto psychologist, Jungian psychologist, in talking about archetypes, he says, think of an image as carrying 1,000 volts. She says an archetype carries 100,000 volts. I really like that. Whoa, you're going to get shocked. That's how powerful I think these 10 metaphors and archetypes are. I think every one of them can get us moving again. Can get men out of our couch potatoes, out of our depression, out of our passivity, where we become too wedded and addicted to things we like, including sports on television or anything else. And sports have their place, we'll get into that, but they don't have the whole place. And I think we're at a time when all of us have to stand up and be counted and get out of our couches. The young are lost without men helping to lead the way. Now, in addition to the 10 archetypes here, another dimension of methodology happened while I was writing the book. And I'd run into men and I'd tell them what I'm doing. And a number of them really wanted to talk. They were no longer silent and hidden about their spirituality. So what I've done is I've thrown in a number of interviews in the book, and a variety of men, some in their 20s, some in their 70s. African American, Asian American, Latino American, Caucasian, and gay and straight. Because I think men are ready to begin to articulate their deepest values. We're all in this struggle together, and we're not going to make it if the men and the women don't come forward with their wisdom about the sacred masculine. So what I like to do is to kind of walk you through these 10 archetypes, obviously not dwelling at length on any one of them, but just to give you a feel and get things stirred up, hopefully. I end the book talking about the sacred marriage. And I was quite comforted when I spoke to a Reichian, Jungian analyst friend of mine who's even older than I, a very wise man. And I asked him, what do you get from Jung when he's talking about the sacred marriage? He said, I get complete confusion. I said, thank God, because that's what I've already gotten too. So that just opened a clean slate for me to do the sacred marriage as I want to do it. And this sacred marriage for me is the healthy wedding of the yin and the yang, the divine feminine and the sacred masculine. And I present several options and images to play with in those last 2 chapters. So what we're doing then is trying to clear the way so that masculine and feminine can really relate today again in a very healthy fashion. So the first of the archetypes is Father Sky. Necessarily first, because cosmology is the story of where we come from, and therefore who we are and where we're going. Now in the modern age, the basic scientific story was that the universe is a machine. What that meant was that Father Sky was dead. Sky was nothing but a junkyard of machine parts, cold, dead, and inert. The result was that we men had to shrink our souls. We had to hunker down, and in the process fitting into the box of the Industrial Revolution, where our souls got so wounded at work that E.F. Schumacher points out. He says, you know, if your body gets hurt at work, you got insurance. But if your soul gets hurt at work, you're on your own. This is why a lot of men come home from work and watch TV. Because we're hurting, we're bleeding. And it's the whole context. But what's so stunning about, now I believe also that in the modern age, this is why violence so increased, I think, in the male heart. In addition, obviously, to our improved technology that made our capacity for violence so much more effective. But I think there was a building up in the heart of violence because men had no place anymore to invest our great passions of moral outrage or of beauty and desire. The sky was off limits. Now today's cosmology, of course, turns all this around 180 degrees. Today, far from being a machine, a junkyard for machine parts, we know that the sky is incredibly alive. A star is being born every 15 seconds. Supernovas are being born. Galaxies are being born. They live out their life like the rest of us, and they die and they resurrect, reincarnating in the elements they spew out to form other galaxies, other stars, other beings. So the whole picture's changed. Father Sky has never been more alive. Now, if you take a look at the creation stories of our species, Father Sky is everywhere in the ancient stories. And not just in indigenous stories, but in Jesus' story. Jesus who prayed to our Father who dwells in the heavens. It's everywhere. But we have been shut down for centuries around this powerful, powerful archetype. D.H. Lawrence got it right. Here's what D.H. Lawrence wrote. What a catastrophe. What a maiming of life when it was made a personal, when love was made a personal, merely personal feeling, taken away from the rising and setting of the sun, and cut off from the magic connection of the solstice and the equinox. This is what is the matter with us. We are bleeding at the roots. We are bleeding at the roots because we are cut off from the earth and sun and stars, and love is a grinning mockery because, poor blossom, we plucked it from its stem on the tree of life and expected it to keep on blooming in our civilized vase on the table. Powerful way of putting it. We've cut love off from the tree of life and put it in our vases. And see, we're living in a man-made world of vases instead of trees of life. You see, Father Sky. And when I can think about Father Sky and the new cosmology, remember the sky is not just that blue we see that's 10 miles away. The sky is the air we're breathing. That's how intimate Father Sky is to us. It's literally the breath that we breathe. Our lungs are perfectly suited to take in Father Sky and breathe Father Sky out. And in the process, to wash our blood, energize our brains, get out of our couches, and stand up for something that's worthy of our defense and our warriorhood. That's Father Sky return, folks. It's an invitation for men to get in touch again with our passions, because Sky can absorb them. And of course, whenever you talk about metaphor and archetype, which is my path tonight, remember we're always talking metaphor. None of this is literal. Remember that 90% of human cultures talk about Father Sky and Mother Earth. That's cool. 10% talk about Mother Sky and Father Earth, such as the Egyptians. That's cool too. So that none of us falls into literalism. Literalism kills. As Paul said, the letter kills, the spirit gives life. The spirit is fluid, like breath and like metaphors. Okay, second archetype is the green man. Now the green man is an ancient pagan symbol, usually depicted with boughs growing out of his mouth, the fifth chakra, and with his beard as a wreath or a wreath of leaves. What is it all about? And in the 12th century in the West, in Europe, the green man came in along with the goddess and with the Black Madonna. All three of them came roaring in the 12th century in Europe. And the green man accompanies the goddess. You might say that it is the man's version of the goddess. The goddess is dwelling in the green man. Why? The green man is talking about our relationship, our essential relationship with nature, and especially with the plant world. The Native Americans say that the wisest creatures on earth are the plants, because they've been here so long, they're so strong, and they were so smart. They learned how to eat the sun. Without photosynthesis, there'd be no animals, and there'd be no two-legged animals. So we are totally interdependent with the plants. Now, in a time of ecological collapse like ours, and of global warming, what metaphor and archetype could be more appropriate than that of the green man? Because the green man is stalwart. The green man is a tree. The green man has spine. And like a tree stands up for what he believes in, or she. And remember, the trees were the first ones to defy gravity. Coming out of the oceans, they stood up and invented a circulatory system that defied gravity. Without the trees having done that 150 million years before we were here, our blood would not be doing what it's doing. So we have a lot in common with trees, including, of course, that they're also processing, cleansing the air for us on a regular basis. But the green man then represents the warrior who defends the earth, defending Mother Earth. There's no man on the planet today, no matter what your profession or lack of profession, no matter what your role as father or grandfather, as citizen, as banker, or repairer of car engines, or carpenter, or artist, there's no man on the planet who is not called today to be a green man, to stand up to defend what we really cherish. Because without passing on a healthy earth and ecosystems and all to the next generations, we are truly failing our species. Just was it yesterday, the front page article in the Chronicle is that 3 fish, trout, salmon, and something else, are going extinct in the state of California. They're on their way out. Much worse than we thought, until this recent study was just finished. So we're living in this time of ecological collapse. Where are the green men? Where are the men? And where is the sacred masculine in the women? We all need to get our strength back in our prophetic anger. Thomas Aquinas says, nothing great happens without anger. So anger is not something to be afraid of, it is something to steer. It's an energy source to steer into creative alternatives. And so all the work we need to do and know we need to do about reinventing energy, non-fossil fuels, cars, and so forth, that can run cleanly, all that is the work of the green man in our time. But it's about consciousness. It's about whether we can connect again, belong again to the community of nature that we've been so cut off from. By the way, there are 2 themes that come up throughout my book because they come up with men all the time. One is aggression, and one is shame. And I'll be talking more about them when I get into another archetype shortly. But I just want to kind of bring that up because, frankly, each of these archetypes has something profound to say about aggression and about shame. Okay, the third archetype is Icarus Daedalus. Most of us think we know that story. It's about this teenager Icarus disobeying his father and crashing when he put on the wings. That's not the story. That's the adultist version of the story. I did my homework on this, and Daedalus, I learned, was not a very cool father. He murdered his nephew. Why did he murder his nephew? Because he was envious of his nephew. Daedalus was a craftsman and an inventor, a very good one. So was his nephew. His nephew invented the saw by meditating on the spine of a fish. And Daedalus was envious of his nephew and killed him. And that is why he and his son Icarus were banished to an island, because he had murdered this innocent young man. Now on the island, he managed to get in trouble again. And then he created these wings, being the inventor he was, to get him and his son off the island safely, because it was the only escape for the king on the island. So it was in that context that Daedalus put the wings on his son and said, you know, let's fly out of here and don't go too close to the sun, by the way. I propose, therefore, that this story is not so much about disobedience from the youth as it is about miscommunication from father to son. Maybe if Daedalus had wrapped the message to his son, you see, about how important it was to fly neither too close to the sun or too close to the water, because if you get too close to the water, then your wings are going to get wet and heavy and you're going to sink that way too. So the middle way was not clearly explained to Icarus, I suppose. And that's why he crashed. So that's how I'm redoing that story. And it is a powerful story because all young men and women ought to put wings on. The act of soaring is, of course, another way of talking about mysticism. And it is about leaving home and leaving the past, if you will, and putting on wings, whether your favorite wings are those of the condor, that South American people have always honored as the sacred bird, or that of the eagle, which of course we honor in North America, or that of the wild goose that they honor in Siberia and in Celtic and Scandinavian lands. Whatever the story, we all have stories about how great it is, how wisdom comes by soaring. And we have to ask, today our parents, our elders, telling the young to put on wings? Or are we busy clipping the wings and complaining about their efforts of putting on wings? Are we helping them to find that middle way once they put on their wings to soar as young adults? And are we encouraging it? And this is the mystical side of our lives, because mysticism is about a trip. It's about tripping. It's about soaring. And the truth is that when elders are not inviting the young to put on healthy wings of mysticism, that's when the young go to drugs and other unsafe rites of passage, because they have this intrinsic yearning for wisdom, for going beyond just the everyday perspective.